Jason picks up a basketball outside his house, takes a shot, and a tiny increase appears on the focus meter. At first glance, this might be the least important GTA 6 leak imaginable. No police chase, no explosion, no massive story reveal. Yet that ordinary moment may tell us more about Rockstar's design philosophy than most of the violent footage that followed. Basketball appears to be a real interactive activity, rather than background decoration. Jason can handle the ball, position himself, aim, shoot, and receive a small progression reward. The HUD also separates the money he carries from another amount associated with his home, suggesting that cash management may have more structure than the single bank balance we were used to in GTA 5. None of that sounds revolutionary by itself. Put those pieces together though, and the direction becomes clearer. Rockstar seems interested in making mundane actions part of the playable world instead of treating Vice City as a beautiful space connecting missions. That distinction becomes much more obvious in the second major clip. Jason drives along the highway, crashes into traffic, and eventually gets into a confrontation with another driver. What catches my attention isn't the fight, it's everything happening around it. Police behavior appears to work through information, rather than pure omniscience. The interface reportedly tracks details connected to the suspect, including the vehicle and appearance, while options such as warning or diffusing a confrontation appear during NPC interactions. Then there are 6 wanted stars. GTA 5 stopped at 5, so bringing the 6th level back could signal that Rockstar wants a larger escalation curve between a minor crime and absolute chaos. More interestingly, the leaked interface suggests police may care about what they actually know about you. Imagine stealing a car when the police have identified that vehicle but not Jason himself. Leaving it behind, changing clothes, disappearing into a crowd, or switching transportation would suddenly have mechanical value. That would change the wanted system from a timer you hide from into a pursuit system you manipulate. We shouldn't assume every debug label survives into the finished game, but the underlying idea is much more important than the exact UI. A later nighttime sequence pushes that philosophy further. Jason enters an industrial location and ends up fighting security guards armed with tasers. Locked vehicles appear to offer different approaches, including smashing a window or cloning a key. After combat, Jason can even pick up somebody else's hat and wear it. A hat sounds trivial until you place it beside a police system that may identify clothing. Suddenly, character customization isn't necessarily cosmetic anymore. The taser itself introduces another useful layer. Non-lethal weapons can create situations that don't immediately turn into massacres, while Jason being affected by electric attacks gives enemies a tool for controlling the player, rather than simply draining health. Security guards also seem more aware of danger than GTA 5's usual enemies. Instead of every NPC behaving like a suicidal target, some appear capable of repositioning or reacting when a situation turns against them. Even the soundtrack helps date this material. Music heard in that footage was released in 2025, which means at least some of what we're seeing comes from a substantially newer environment than the infamous 2022 development leaks. That's important. The 2022 footage showed a game being constructed. These new videos show systems starting to function together. Another leaked sequence, sometimes referred to as the Junkies footage, makes that difference even easier to see. Jason uses melee weapons, interacts with incapacitated characters, accesses a weapon wheel, takes recovery items, and encounters contextual actions that resemble the broader interaction philosophy Rockstar developed for Red Dead Redemption 2. What I find most significant here isn't any single weapon or healing item. It's the number of verbs available to the player. Modern open worlds often become repetitive because nearly every problem eventually reduces to aiming, shooting, and driving somewhere else. Red Dead Redemption 2 tried to break that pattern by letting the player greet people, antagonize them, rob them, surrender, inspect things, pick objects up, and react differently depending on context. GTA 6 looks like it may be importing that philosophy into a much faster world. If Rockstar succeeds, the result won't simply be GTA 5 with more detailed graphics. Vice City could become an environment where the same encounter produces different outcomes depending on how you approach it. Then the plane footage changes the scale of the discussion completely. Jason takes a small aircraft into the air, and suddenly we're no longer evaluating individual animations. We can see how much world the engine is trying to keep alive at once. Road networks continue far into the distance. Buildings remain visible across huge stretches of terrain. Traffic exists below the aircraft rather than disappearing into empty scenery, while clouds and atmospheric effects give altitude an actual sense of depth. There's a temptation to look at footage like this and immediately start calculating the size of the map. I think that's the wrong question. A giant map is easy to advertise. Maintaining visual continuity, traffic, landmarks, vegetation, lighting, and useful spaces across that map is much harder. GTA 6 appears to be chasing density rather than empty square mileage. The same flight also reveals a much larger radio interface, including an on-demand option. Whether that becomes a Spotify-like system, a playlist feature, some form of saved music, or something more limited remains unknown. Still, its presence suggests Rockstar is reconsidering systems that have barely changed since older GTA games. At the end of the aerial footage, the person controlling the build shoots letters into a wall. That moment matters for reasons unrelated to the graffiti itself. It strongly suggests the material isn't simply a collection of pre-recorded Rockstar marketing clips stolen from a server. Somebody appears able to control a playable version of the game. That doesn't prove they possess the complete retail build. Those two claims are very different. The footage repeatedly shows tutorial-style interactions, a relatively limited progression state, and a heavy focus on Jason, which could mean the accessible build is restricted to a particular section of the game. The hypercar footage gives us another window into Rockstar's obsession with physical interaction. Jason attempts to steal an expensive vehicle, but the driver doesn't simply vanish from the seat like an animation prop. Resistance can trigger a struggle, forcing the player to physically remove the owner. That's a tiny mechanical change with enormous consequences for immersion. Carjacking has always been one of GTA's fundamental actions. After hundreds of hours, though, it becomes invisible because pressing one button produces almost the exact same animation every time. Adding resistance, different entry methods, vehicle security and tracking means stealing a car can become an event rather than a shortcut. Vehicle trackers are especially interesting. If certain cars can be identified or followed after theft, expensive vehicles might finally feel meaningfully different from random traffic. Taking a rare hypercar could create consequences that stealing an old sedan doesn't. Mechanical detail continues once Jason starts driving. The vehicle appears more planted than GTA 5's lightweight cars, body movement responds convincingly to speed, and aerodynamic parts visibly react during braking. Road width also makes high-speed driving feel faster because the environment passes much closer to the car. Rockstar doesn't need every vehicle to behave like a racing simulator. It simply needs enough weight and suspension movement to convince your brain that 2 tons of metal are moving underneath you. The second hypercar segment introduces something far more controversial: fuel. Jason physically stops to refuel. That immediately raises the question everyone has been arguing about. Are we actually going to run out of gasoline while driving around GTA 6? Maybe. But seeing a fuel gauge in development footage doesn't prove Rockstar will force players to visit a gas station every 20 minutes. Fuel could matter only for certain missions. It might be optional immersion. Perhaps stolen vehicles occasionally have low tanks. The mechanic could even have been tested and later reduced. What we can say is that Rockstar has built enough underlying functionality for refueling to exist. The same sequence shows store robbery mechanics, interaction with a register, vehicle damage, and weapon use around cars. Taken together, it suggests GTA 6 is blending simulation systems with traditional sandbox chaos instead of choosing one side completely. That's exactly where Rockstar needs to be careful. Red Dead Redemption 2 benefited from slowness because being a cowboy naturally supports deliberate action. Grand Theft Auto has a different rhythm. If every car needs fuel, every weapon needs maintenance, every meal matters, and every crime requires several menus, the realism becomes friction. The ideal version of GTA 6 uses simulation to create stories without making ordinary play exhausting. A strip club leak provides a completely different kind of stress test. Forget the obvious content for a moment and watch the room. NPCs aren't simply scattered across the floor at mathematically convenient distances. People appear in clusters. Some are talking, others are watching performances, moving through the interior, or occupying their own little social spaces. That difference sounds subtle until you compare it with older open worlds. Games traditionally populate crowds with individuals. Real places are populated by groups. Friends stand together, couples move together, people wait around entrances, somebody blocks a walkway because they're talking to another person. Several conversations compete with music at the same time. Replicating that messiness is one of the hardest ways to make a virtual place believable. GTA 6 seems to understand it. The gas station footage shows the same philosophy from the opposite direction. Instead of a perfectly staged cinematic encounter, Jason comes across an absurd situation involving an NPC. A vehicle and fuel, steals transportation, causes further chaos, and eventually dies. The important part is how many systems collide inside a short stretch of unscripted gameplay. Pedestrian behavior, vehicle theft, Environmental interaction, physics, traffic, damage, and police logic all have opportunities to affect the outcome. Even the return of the wasted screen is interesting because it gives us one of the clearest looks at how the game transitions from active simulation into failure. More revealing is the objective visible afterward. Jason is told to return to Lucia. That confirms something the early Jason-heavy footage couldn't show us. Lucia isn't merely separated into an unrelated campaign. At least some missions appear to keep both protagonists involved within the same sequence. Exactly how character switching works remains unclear. GTA V allowed Franklin, Michael, and Trevor to exist independently across the map, sometimes switching during missions and sometimes living separate lives. With Jason and Lucia being a couple, Rockstar has an opportunity to make that system feel much more connected. The nighttime plane footage takes us back above Vice City, except darkness exposes details daytime footage hides. Lighting stretches across the city instead of existing only around the player. Roads form illuminated networks. Traffic continues moving beneath the aircraft, and major areas remain visually readable across distance. A fishing-related prompt appears as well, adding another activity to the growing pile. Basketball, shopping, fishing, flying, robberies, different methods of stealing vehicles, contextual NPC interactions, none of those proves GTA 6 will have the deepest version of any individual mechanic. Their significance comes from coexistence. Rockstar's ambition appears to be building a world where dozens of medium-sized systems overlap until the player begins creating situations the designers didn't explicitly script. The nudist community footage sounds like pure GTA shock value when you describe it in one sentence. From a technical perspective, however, it's one of the better demonstrations of NPC diversity. Characters aren't merely copies with different shirts. Body types vary considerably, groups behave differently, people respond to Jason's attention, and panic appears to produce several reactions once violence begins. Some people flee, others hesitate. Certain NPCs surrender or collapse. That variety matters more than increasing the raw number of pedestrians. A crowd of 100 identical AI routines still feels artificial. 40 characters making context-sensitive decisions can feel alive. Then came 919. The nightclub sequence isn't impressive because Rockstar managed to render another dark room full of neon. GTA has been doing nightclubs for decades. What stands out is crowd management. Dense groups remain active while Jason moves through the space. Conversations continue under the music. Animation doesn't appear completely synchronized across everyone, and the room keeps its sense of social noise. Crowd simulation is beginning to look like GTA 6's real generational feature. Not ray tracing, not texture resolution, not the number of reflections on a car, people. The beach footage reinforces that argument more strongly than almost anything else leaked. Jason rides through an enormous concentration of pedestrians near the water. Some are standing, others are moving. Groups occupy different portions of the sand. Swimmers are visible nearby, and animals react within the same environment. For a console open-world game, density like that creates a brutal technical problem. Every visible person needs animation, navigation, collision rules, some level of decision-making, and a response when the player does something unpredictable. Now add water simulation, then traffic nearby, lighting, audio, streaming assets, physics, sand interaction. All of it has to happen while Jason moves quickly enough to force new parts of the world into memory. That is why I find the beach leak more technically impressive than many carefully staged trailer shots. A trailer can hide performance compromises. Raw movement through a dense space exposes them. Of course, compressed leaked footage cannot tell us whether the final game holds a perfect frame rate, and making performance claims from these videos would be irresponsible. What it does show is the target Rockstar is aiming for. The used game store footage initially seems almost comical after everything else. Jason walks inside a shop filled with games, electronics, and merchandise. Shelves carry individually designed items. Fictional media has its own branding, and wearable accessories can apparently be inspected or selected. Again, the question isn't whether buying headphones is an amazing gameplay mechanic. Look at what Rockstar is doing with interiors. Older GTA games often created detailed buildings exclusively for missions. Once the mission ended, much of that environment stopped mattering. GTA 6 seems increasingly interested in stores and venues that exist because the city needs them, not simply because the story needs a shootout there. That can fundamentally change exploration. A city starts feeling enormous when you realize buildings aren't just scenery. Later footage returns to nighttime driving. This time with Jason stealing a hot rod and entering a police pursuit. By now, The earlier wanted system clues become more meaningful because we're seeing pursuit logic under another set of conditions rather than one isolated debug encounter. The same material finally gives Lucia a presence after a remarkably Jason-heavy series of leaks. For days, that imbalance created speculation that whoever had access to the footage might only possess a limited Jason section of the game. Lucia appearing doesn't completely disprove the restricted build theory, but it does show that the accessible material reaches farther into the narrative than the earliest clips suggested. Then the leak crossed a line it hadn't crossed before. The prologue appeared. Lucia is shown during the opening portion of the story, including prison material and fragments connected to earlier events. I'm deliberately not going to reconstruct the story beat by beat, because the interesting thing here isn't spoiling 5 minutes of a game people have waited years to experience. What matters analytically is that we can finally compare Rockstar's cinematic direction with its systemic gameplay. The transition looks much closer to Red Dead Redemption 2 than GTA 5 in tone. Character framing feels more intimate, animation carries more weight, and the narrative appears willing to spend time establishing Jason and Lucia as people before throwing the player into endless open-world destruction. Whether that pacing survives the entire game is impossible to know from a tiny section. A prologue is designed to establish context. It doesn't tell us what Hour 30 will feel like. The leaker has also made claims about the development state of GTA 6. Those claims deserve skepticism. Seeing bugs inside a development build doesn't prove the game is in trouble. Large games remain filled with unfinished elements surprisingly late because thousands of systems are being integrated simultaneously. A broken NPC animation could already be fixed in Rockstar's internal branch while still appearing in footage captured from an older build. Likewise, visual quality alone doesn't reveal software maturity. A beautiful street can sit beside unfinished mission logic. One polished cutscene can exist inside a build containing dozens of placeholders. Game development isn't a straight line where 80% complete means every individual component is 80% polished. This is exactly why the 2022 leak was so badly misunderstood. People looked at exposed development tools, unfinished textures and placeholder assets, then concluded GTA 6 somehow had poor graphics. 3 years later, the difference is obvious. The older leak showed construction. The newer footage shows integration, and integration may be the single most important word when judging GTA 6. Very few ideas visible here are unprecedented on their own. Games already have fuel systems. Others simulate detailed crowds. Plenty offer fishing. Many allow contextual conversations, some track witnesses. Others feature advanced vehicle physics, dynamic weather, interactive stores, extensive interiors, or NPC schedules. Rockstar's advantage has never been inventing every mechanic first. Their strength is putting an absurd number of systems inside the same world without making that world feel like a collection of separate mini-games. GTA 6 appears to be pushing that philosophy further than GTA 5 ever could. The police might understand what car you're driving. That car may have a tracker. Its owner could resist when you steal it. Changing clothes may alter how you're identified. An NPC witnessing the crime can react differently from another pedestrian. You can escape into traffic populated by groups rather than isolated clones. The vehicle itself carries more physical information. Nearby stores are potentially usable spaces instead of painted facades. Meanwhile, planes, boats, bikes, beaches, clubs, and residential areas all operate inside the same simulation. That's the real pattern hidden across these leaks. Rockstar isn't merely increasing detail. It's increasing relationships between details. One system affecting another is what produces believable chaos. There are still huge unknowns. We don't know how much of the map is meaningfully explorable rather than visually impressive. Long-term progression remains unclear. The economy could be deep or almost irrelevant. Fuel might become important, optional or barely noticeable. Police identification could dominate free-roam gameplay or get simplified before release. Activities such as basketball and fishing might contain real progression, or they might be brief diversions. NPC density could change depending on platform and performance mode. Nothing leaked so far gives us a reliable picture of GTA Online's eventual structure. Even the character switching system remains mostly hidden. Those uncertainties matter because hype has a habit of turning development features into imaginary promises. The safest conclusion is also the most interesting one. GTA 6 doesn't look revolutionary because of one giant feature. It looks ambitious because Rockstar is attempting to make dozens of smaller systems acknowledge each other. Basketball told us the world contains activities. The driving footage showed how NPCs and police can react. Combat exposed contextual actions. The plane revealed scale, Hypercars demonstrated deeper vehicle logic. Gas stations suggested simulation. Clubs showed social density. The beach stressed the crowd technology. Stores exposed interior detail. Later pursuits gave us more evidence of law enforcement behavior. Lucia's footage finally connected all of those mechanics back to an actual story. Taken together, the leaked videos paint a surprisingly consistent picture. GTA 5 often felt like an enormous playground. Red Dead Redemption 2 felt more like a place that continued existing around the player. GTA 6 appears to be attempting something much harder, combining the speed and stupidity of that playground with the systemic density of that living world. If Rockstar actually lands that balance, the biggest upgrade won't be Vice City looking more realistic. It will be Vice City behaving more realistically right up until the player decides to completely destroy the illusion. And that, more than any texture, reflection, map measurement, or leaked screenshot, is probably where the next generation of Grand Theft Auto really begins.